Hello. Today, Charlie, welcome, and thank you so much for booking in a slot to have a chat with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I was really excited to get your email or get your message on Instagram. And yeah, this kind of thing is really inspiring to me. So I really appreciate you having me.
Okay. Okay. I forgot. I should have said Charlie Calotta Reacts. That's the name of the
That
channel.
is the name of the
Yes.
channel. I
And we shall
actually, yeah.
say it.
Well, I recently renamed the channel to that actually. So
Okay.
thanks for saying that. Yeah.
So what's it now? To Charlie Calotta Reacts.
That's it.
That's
Yeah.
that's it now.
Yeah.
Because now are you completely focusing on the reactions, or
Um,
because you've done singing and different
yeah.
training
Let me
before?
adjust my microphone real quick.
Okay.
Just because it's a little far. There, that should be better. Yeah. So when I originally started doing content, it was focused around vocal teaching. And
Yeah.
since then, and at the time, I was doing just teaching, and then I shifted into teaching and doing the reactions from a voice professional's perspective, a teacher and a
Hmm.
performer, and in the classical voice world, opera. Uh, since then, when the lockdown started to let up, I then began to kind of grow my performance career, which left very little room for teaching. So I had to make the
Okay.
decision of, okay, I can't really teach and make YouTube videos and sing all at the same time. And I decided that with all of the ecosystem that I created, what brought me the most joy was like the in-depth exploration of hearing music for the first time and giving a perspective on it and then digging a little deeper and just being a part of that
Hmm.
conversation, which was also something I could sustain more reasonably with my performing career as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Honestly, my brain is just fried right now because I have so many directions that I want to. I am quite new to the interviewing. What I'm going to do though is ask you about the Ren and the Ren
Mm.
fans thing first, and then we can
Of
talk
course.
about your other things because I really want to get to that. But first of all, Ren, you're fairly new
Mm.
to the world.
Yeah, yeah. I've only watched two videos so far of his, but
Yeah.
it's I mean, I've done probably over 800 different reactions
Yeah.
on YouTube. Probably two-thirds of them are published on the channel. Some of them are on my Patreon library, which isn't
Okay.
accessible right now. But with that being said, like Ren is one of those artists that are very rare to come by. Um, it's absolutely like mind blowing. I'll say, yeah,
Because I think you said somebody had recommended in the comment, but then you also heard from Nicole.
yeah,
Had you already decided from the comment, oh, I'll explore that? Or
yeah.
was it Nicole as well?
So the commenter was one of my earliest supporters and patrons, and when I started making videos again and posting because I took a little break, she commented, "It's like, yep, this is my recommendation. Listen to High Rent." And I was like, so whenever I get a recommendation from someone I trust like that, I'll always do a little
Yeah.
research and be like, okay, is anyone else listening to this? What's going on? Is whatever. Because sometimes you do it because someone really wants you to, and sometimes you see, wow, this is a part of a bigger conversation, and the
Yeah.
rent thing exploded. And I have been working with Nicole for a little bit. For a few years, I've known her, and she recently started doing reaction videos, and I was kind of talking to her on how to start that up and gave her that advice, and
Hmm.
she took her own direction absolutely and found she started with Harry Mack and then was recommended to
Yeah.
Ren probably through like the spoken word like rap hip hop style
Yeah.
thing. People found her that way, and uh she was like, this was absolutely crazy. Like, this was amazing. You need to do this. And I was like, okay, well, I usually do like intense vocals and heavy metal and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And she's like, no, 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 no. You need to just listen to Ren. I'm like, okay, cool, cool, cool. And so,
Yeah.
that
So you
comment
needed that
combined it with
extra push.
Nicole. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's always a matter of, how much time do I have? How much music can I listen to? What can I edit and put up and that kind of thing. So I
Yeah.
am a little discerning with the choosing process, but that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how I got to Ren. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because when I found Nicole and then she introduced me to you, and I was thinking it's such an obvious fit for the opera and the whole performance and the drama and the storytelling, and yet I didn't see it beforehand. I had to have it pointed out to me. To me, it's such an obvious fit now.
Yeah, it really is. One of the things, I mean, you asked me about like going from like the vocal education performance standpoint to
Yeah.
just the reactions. And I know like on the surface that can be like, oh, you're just gonna sit and watch videos and give your take on them. But in my mind, like as I do consider myself like a researcher of performance. I do have a lot of thoughts that
Hmm.
have been organized and developed through doing these like reactions to different live performances and different types of videos. And one of the conclusions I've gotten to on the importance of doing these reactions is giving like an in-depth attention to how performance art has developed over history. All
Hmm.
Pretty much anyone who goes to school for classical music will do that kind of performance study for pieces that were developed 300 years ago, 200 years ago, whatever, from the dawn of opera, right? And what I've learned to study in that sense is like, what is opera? You know, people think of it and it's just like,
Hmm.
it's just it's just singing. It's just a style of singing that people do, and there's orchestra
Yeah.
and stuff. But if you look at modern opera, it is nothing at all like Mozart or like Verdi, Puccini, all of those old Monteverdi, the old, great traditional operas. It's really what we talked about in that video about with Ren. It's a combination of all art forms in person on stage,
Yeah.
and those boundaries are always being crossed. And so my fascination with Ren really does stem from every single angle being approached from an artistic and expressive standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was really interesting because you mentioned opera and then you were saying about universal themes of the stories. And I was thinking, oh, that's it. That's the exact expression that's what I was feeling, but I hadn't put into words. And I think that's why I like the reactor videos, because I'm like, yes, there's something. And I think you were saying about, I think you said something like you almost felt called out. It's like, oh, that's the voice. That's the voice in my head. And
Yes.
it's just like that universal theme. And that obviously that's why opera has gone on as long as it has, because of those elements of the story. I study story and I'm well into that. So you can geek out and tell me about that. That's good.
Yeah, so I mean, that's exactly it. When I approach an operatic role, what happens is I'll get the script, I'll get the assignment, and I'll see the role, and I'll say, okay, this was written by Mozart in 1730. So these
Hmm.
characters are doing these things. If it's a comedy, it's like, why are these people messing around with these people? What is the direction these characters are taking? And has there been a time in my life when I've had this kind of feeling or taken this kind of direction?
Hmm.
And I look for those moments that I feel called out, basically. And I've never thought of it in that way, but in that video, when I said that, it's an honest truth. It's like, what is this music pulling out of me, and what am I
Hmm.
first most recognizing in this music? And so when
Yeah.
Ren was talking about like, well, when he was, let's be really specific, in High Ren, as that uh,
Yeah.
inner voice that is pushing you down.
Hmm.
You can talk about it
Yeah.
from a psychological perspective. Most people have two voices in their head. The way they conceptualize their mind on the inside. There's the voice
Hmm.
that wants to do, and then there's the voice that wants to stop, and that's part of human
Yeah.
nature. You're a
Hmm.
creative, and any creative has felt this. There's the
Hmm.
anxiety that's protecting them, that old like
Yeah.
carnal ancient evolutionary anxiety that's protecting us from going out and getting eaten by a bear, right? And we can consider it, part of our like monkey brain trying to protect us. But in modern
Hmm.
times, 90% of that instinct is kind of useless and works against us. And so when
Hmm.
when someone is able to frame that voice in a way that is so like real and tangible and brings you
Hmm.
awareness to it, like that's an absolutely stunning phenomenon. And that's the true value of art, being able to
Yeah.
reference, bring awareness to that universal truth that we all deal with in some way. And I know so many people were like, well, it's
Yeah.
not just creatives, it's everyone. Yeah, obviously it's everyone. And everyone
Yeah.
in some capacity in their life have the capacity for creativity. Um, and so that is that stunning, realness in art. And it comes up
Mhm.
and I should say it this way. The practice of doing these videos has is it really trains the brain to pull that out of any type of like artistic
Mhm.
endeavor. People.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of reaction channels that try to create controversy and kind of critique in a way that is
Mhm.
I don't think has a place in music and art. I really do
Mhm.
believe that like the at its best, reaction videos are an exploration and analysis of from a subjective standpoint, like anyone would write a musicology paper, but it's in conversation form. So being able to identify those things and talking about your experience and then share that and then be able to have a dialogue in the comment section with people who show up like that is what art needs to be about, is about everyone sharing their thoughts and no one is wrong, but we can learn from each other. And anyway, that was the most gripping part of that Ren video to me, is how so many people were touched deeply by this narrative, this dialectic.
Yeah.
um, and beyond that, it's like a philosophical thing. If you look at like Socrates' writings, they're formed in the mode of dialectics of a student speaking with a teacher, and that conversation is the way that the information is portrayed. And when I watched High Ren, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I referenced a book called The Courage to Be Disliked, and it is basically a young man who's learning about the world, who's facing a lot of trouble, and a philosopher who has the knowledge and is trying to convey it to them. And
Mhm.
by reading this conversation that they're having, you learn about yourself. And that's what I felt I was
Mhm.
getting when I was watching High Rent, is like watching this
Yeah.
conversation and this negotiation that mirrors this universal that I also feel in my head. I'm learning and I'm exploring. I'm learning ways to express and I'm learning ways to free myself of the struggle that this protagonist is having. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I can say
Yeah,
anything
and
more
I
about it. I
think
kind of went down the rabbit hole there
I
a
know,
little
but
bit, but I hope that was
I
good.
know, but well, we all love rabbit holes here. So it was also when, in part of it, he says about having a god complex. So it's kind of the "Who are you? You're not good enough," and then it's like, "Oh, now you're so big for your boots," and it's like, "Oh, that's it. That's the two. That's the two extremes." Well, I'm putting words in your mouth, but that's how I feel sometimes when I'm creating things that I'm not good enough, and then, "Oh, you think you're so special, do you?" You know, it's like,
Absolutely,
I need to rest
absolutely.
somewhere in the middle here.
Tell me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, but do you get to the point where maybe we're the same here, because I always get ideas. You always get ideas about things you want to create, and you have that
Mhm.
resistance, and then you feel so good about putting the resistance away. You're like, I've got this. I'm in the flow. I'm going to start working. You do the work. And then maybe halfway or two-thirds through the work, you're like, yeah, this isn't as good as I thought it was going to be. Maybe I should just drop it, whether,
Have you read
yeah.
Stephen Pressfield? Have
Stephen
Stephen
Pressfield.
Pressfield and the War of Art?
Oh, yes, 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 yes. I read that in
Yes,
college and I read it
classic.
a
Yeah,
few
he
years
was in
later. Yes. Wonderful, wonderful book. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no. So because he spells it out perfectly, and he says about that halfway, two-thirds through.
Yep.
And also, there's another quote that I like. That's the Ira Glass quote
Mm.
called "The Gap." Have you heard of that one?
I do know of Ira Glass. I don't know if I've read The Gap.
The Gap is quite famous from it. So obviously he's known for his storytelling, but the gap is you're attracted to something because you have good taste. So you really like something, but when you go to make it, your skills do not match up to the taste.
Right.
And that's the gap.
Yes. And
And
you
it's
have
like, and a
to
lot of people quit in that. Yeah.
it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
that
yeah.
graph, and so you get the graph, and you start out here, you're like, "Wow, I'm so excited, I can totally do this, I see it, I'm inspired,"
Yeah.
and then
I
you
know so
realize
much about this.
all of
Yeah.
the work you need to do, and you just need to go up and up,
Yeah.
and you need to trudge up that hill and have perseverance to eventually get to the point where the training and the time you've spent, it
Yeah.
matches the passion for it, and you can go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I know. Well, I didn't start by doing reaction videos, and I don't think of myself as a reaction channel or
Mm.
anything, but people were encouraging me to do it. And when I did the first one, well, basically I got the tech wrong, but also I didn't react. I was just like, because I was watching Ren, I was like a fire hose of information
Mm.
at me, and I couldn't process it, and I couldn't do a reaction. It was just, okay,
It's yeah.
you're out of your depth here, you know.
That's a fascinating. I would love to talk about that a little bit if you want, because
Yeah, yeah.
I consider myself. I kind of accidentally got into reaction videos, and didn't really know. The first reaction video I ever did was to do you know the band Nightwish? Are you aware of them?
No, but I've seen it in your list.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
watched the BTS video and
oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah. BTS is great. There's a lot of good reviews
That
and
was earlier days.
earlier days.
That seemed a different style, but we'll talk about that,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, I have a lot to say about the style, to changing of style. So the I was teaching students online. I was doing public
Mhm,
vocal studio classes, and so students would come in, and I would just give them a free voice lesson, and people would be watching on the live stream. And then someone asked me, he was like, "Hey, can you just watch this video and give us your like thoughts about the vocals?" And I was cool. So I'm just sitting there doing the thing I
mhm.
do on my live stream, sitting there. I have the video up right here. I'm watching it, and I'm like, wow, this is like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And I'm like, how do I add value to this? How do I do anything? How do I say any commentary? Maybe I just say what I think, and I'll probably be wrong, but we're live. Like this is live streamed. I
Yeah.
can't just be like, no, not now. And I just gave my thoughts, and it wasn't perfect, and a lot of the things I said were kind of weird and like not relevant, or at least this is all in my head, right? And this video
Mhm,
now probably has like around 100,000 views or something like that, and people criticize me, and people agree with me, and people appreciate me. At the end of the day, I loved the performance, and I felt like I added enough information from the perspective of a classical singer that was good enough for me. And but the key to that was that because it was live streamed, I didn't have a second to stop, to second guess myself. It's a weird
mhm,
dynamic that I've kind of explored within myself of when I do the live streams, the voice of "you can't do this" kind of goes away. And it's very parallel to my experience of stepping on stage with an orchestra and performing something that I've practiced, but you never know if it's gonna be perfect or not. It's terrifying to do that. As a live
mhm,
performer, I hate making recordings of my art because I'm used to doing it with an audience, with people there who I can just
mhm,
who will be there, who I know are receiving it in the way I'm giving it. And I think that is the core of, like, doing reaction commentary videos in a way that shuts everything down,
mhm,
the negative voices and even the positive voices. You kind of get into this flow state, right? If we can talk about like the creative process, the flow state is where you want to be. In the War of Art,
yeah,
he talks about that, and everything that you want to accomplish is possible when you kind of shut out the noise, the positive noise and the negative noise. And in terms of the style that I've made reaction videos in the past, it was always in front of a live audience. And I
mhm,
think there is something very like nuclear, like very eruptive about making content with knowing that there's an audience there. Uh,
mhm,
the creative process is always about the work itself, and then the audience can choose how it's perceived. But when you can do the work knowing that it's going to be received in some way, positive, negative, whatever, when you
mhm,
know that what you're putting into the work is just like you and where you're at right now, then the workflow becomes a lot easier and simpler, because it's just about doing. And that's like very philosophical and crazy, but that was like I in my journey, I see that as the biggest difference of having a live audience there that's going to perceive what I'm saying in some way. which won't give me a second chance to go back and fix anything. It won't let me critique because it's impossible. It's out there the second it happens. The moment it happens, it is being
Yeah.
perceived. Um, that is why the style I had for reactions was as it was. It was all live. Um,
Mhm.
and I never really saw anyone else doing that at the time, and so I just rolled with it, and I was like, this is going to be the kind of content we're doing. Hundreds of videos later, um, I was like, all right, a little burnt out, got to go perform. Took a little break, come
Okay.
back, and you saw the style of video I did with Nicole, and some of my more recent videos are just sit down and record. But every single time I do that, I just imagine there's someone sitting on the other side of that camera watching the videos, and that shuts down that negative voice. And it also shuts down the hubris voice because it's like, I say myself all the time while I'm recording, oh, that was the worst thing you could have said here, or that was like whatever, or that was a great thing you could have said here. It doesn't matter. We got to still keep talking, and we got to still keep
Yeah.
keeping the conversation going and adding value or analyzing or something. And knowing that that's kind of like the evolution of how it all kind of started working in my mind, that allowed me to create without second guessing, without pulling back, without stopping. um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I really wanted to point out in terms of the analysis. I started off when I used to teaching and helping with communication skills. I started off by doing the feedback.
Mm,
And there was always two types of feedback. There was giving somebody that analysis and the technical and different things like that. But there was also the second type of feedback, which was they're swept along with what's happening and they're relating it to a story that they've said or different things like that. And that's a completely different. So the BTS video I
mm.
saw, you were in your analysis mode and you were talking about his voice and different things like that. But when I saw you do High Ren, you did this a lot. You were like, oh, and you were into the story. And then you came back, and it was almost like you watched it again and did the analysis part. But for a while, you were, oh, that makes me think of me. That makes me feel called out. That makes me think of my friend. And I used to think that being wrapped up in the story was people getting distracted and that was almost a negative. But I think now it's a compliment. It's that they've been so absorbed by the art and the story that they're completely there.
Yeah,
Does that make sense to you?
absolutely. So it's a matter of, I talk to other musicians all the time about starting channels. Nicole was one of those, and I knew her before that, and other people who start doing reaction videos because face value. If you've never heard of a reaction video and someone describes it to you, they're like, that's the laziest content you could make. But you and I are sitting here and having this conversation because we understand the value of it. And there are
Yeah.
thousands of hundreds of thousands of channels who probably do it, like kind of phone it in. But the what I believe that musicians can bring to the space as a value is, the experience living in music and being able to kind of process the intellectual and the emotional sort of simultaneously, and just being open to absorbing the music that you're sitting within, right? Or the performance of some way. And so um when in that Ren video, the you can't avoid the emotion. So why try to stifle it? When I sit down to record a
Hmm.
video, the muscle that has been trained that I didn't have at first, that I've worked to create after like really intellectualizing what this is and justifying it to
Hmm.
myself, is sit down, watch a video, experience the video with zero preconceptions in any terms. I don't have an agenda when I sit down to watch anything. It's I try to clear my mind, play the video, and anything that happens happens. Any
Hmm.
emotion, any intellectual thought, anything about vocal technique, anything about performance practice, historical context, let those come out as they will. It will never be perfect. I will never be able to say everything I want to say. And
Hmm.
that creates a piece of art that I'm happy with. That reaction video, that commentary, that piece of the conversation is always going to be authentic to me if I know that I sat down and approached it with like a clean slate.
Yeah.
So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
I
Yeah,
think
I but I hear what you're saying regarding, like, the emotional
yeah.
stuff. People, if they some of the people I work with who are starting reaction channels, like, "I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say." I'm like, "You can say anything. You can say anything you want.
Yeah.
You can feel anything you want." And the more you forget about what people think and just realize that you're having a conversation with the viewer, in literally you are, because people are gonna comment
Mhm.
and you're gonna talk to them about it. But as long as you know you're part of the dialogue, you don't have to change the
Mhm.
world with any commentary. You just have to be there. You have to be present, and you have
Yeah.
to experience and learn. And in doing so, you learn about music. You learn about being an
Mhm.
artist. You learn about what people are doing, and you become inspired, and it impacts your work. The number of musicians I've spoken to who started doing reaction channels who said, like, this totally changed the direction of my art personally. The singing I do, the
Yeah.
music I make, the things I learn, it's incredible. Um, and that is the beauty of it, as an exercise, as a mode of entertainment, as a mode of intellectual development, as a mode of forwarding discussions and including people and creating communities. That's what music's all about to me, and so that's what I want to bring into those videos. So it it's very, it's so interesting to me that you said what you said about, like, not, being kind of overwhelmed with the story and not wanting to be too personal with it. And but I think that's the
Yeah.
beauty of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was definitely happier when I was doing videos teaching things rather than talking about myself, and somebody was suggesting that I need to experiment and go more in that direction.
Were you
Um,
happy, or were you
yeah.
just more comfortable?
Oh, I was more comfortable. I was not happy with the product.
Sure.
I was not happy with the videos, and I didn't feel it represented me. And in fact, uh, this is a bit of a digression, but I started drawing cartoons,
Yes, I've seen them. They're
and I
wonderful.
felt like that's me.
Yeah.
That felt like if somebody wanted to work with me and they didn't know me very well, I would point them to the cartoons rather than the video.
Mm.
And it's like, that's what my inner dialogue is. That's what's going on.
Oh, that's
And
fascinating. Yeah.
that I want to do it. I'm scared to do it. You know.
Oh, I love them. I went through a bunch of
So-
them on your Instagram. They're really, really
oh,
nice. Yeah, and they're so brutally
yeah.
honest. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny because somebody said to me, that they were cute or something, and I thought, "I don't think you've got the sentiment because there's quite tough things that
Yeah, it is
I'm
real.
making light of it and it's cartoon,
Yeah, I
but
remember I got to one and I was like, "All right, I'm gonna close Instagram and I'm gonna go do something else." They're very heavy hitting, but I appreciate that so much, because it's that raw expression. It's that unfiltered expression that you never find on the internet. I think that's part of this revolution of Ren is
yes.
uh,
Yeah.
a lot of what we're used to in the last decade and a half of social media is people just kind of putting the best of themselves forward, whether that's
Mhm.
50% of their life or 2% of their life, only putting the best
Yeah.
forward. It's created this kind of imbalance in our perspective of other humans. We're not,
Yeah.
Nicole touched on this briefly in one of our videos, but like, the, we're not meant to be exposed to this many people, this many perspectives, this many things. And so
Mhm.
the dialogue and the nature of what we have to do now as a society is do our best to feel more connected with each other, because everything that's happening is
Yeah.
making us feel more disconnected from other people. And so the brutal honesty in Ren's
Yeah.
portrayals in the stories, and only of what I've seen, uh, is really important for changing that narrative, that perspective, and people need to follow that urge to just be honest and acknowledge the ugly along with the
Mhm.
beautiful. And that's, I think, really important, especially on social media, which is something we really can't avoid. You can say that as much as you want. It's designed to keep us hooked in. So if we can continue that dialogue of sharing brutal honesty, harsh truths, but also like true beauty, and then the beauty of reclaiming, what is important to you, that kind of thing is, I think, invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something I noticed a lot in the comments that people were saying they were hungry for, and, that they wanted that kind of conversation, which leads me to Ren fans. Now, you already had a successful channel, but have you been hit by Ren fans, or
Oh yeah,
what's
they all
happened?
showed up. I'll say this, like I said this at the beginning of the last video I did with Nicole, but you know, I have a lot of like the BTS fans are huge. Like
Yeah,
they're wonderful. The Nightwish fans, there's specific artists who have really like massive followings. And then there's also some other communities who are really not they don't engage in the conversation in a way that I like. So there's which is fascinating because I post some videos and for certain artists and their fans will come in and just like really I don't like the way they interact on in the community. So sometimes I'll
okay.
unlist those videos just to get them out of the conversation. It's a really weird dynamic. The Ren fans, on the other hand, uh, the Renegades, they're wonderful. I honestly I appreciate that they will like watch the video, pay attention, and have those conversations. And they're
Yeah,
I mean that's not exclusive to them. There's plenty of people who are there who always have the
yeah,
conversations
yeah.
that I like to have. I'll just say it that way. Like I like to have those
Mm,
conversations with people will hear what I say, respond, and then I can respond. I can disagree with them or agree with them, and they'll respond back, and we'll just have a discussion about music. It's
mhm.
when I found none of them who are I don't know, aggressive to any type of like negative perception or anything like that.
Yeah,
It's all people who are just like want to explore their own life dynamic through the expression of music and the perception of music.
yeah,
And I love that. That's how I live my life. That's how like the people I care about, I want to be around. That's how they live their lives. And like that to me is like that's just the community that I want to have on the channel, and I'm so happy that they've shown up and so many like inspiring stories that I've heard of from people and how
yeah,
this music changed their lives, and that's that's the beauty of like the internet, right? It's like you can connect with people in this
yeah,
way, and you can learn their stories, and you're like, this is really cool. This is inspiring
yeah,
me to dig deeper. Yeah.
yeah. So what's next?
Um, on YouTube or in life or in general.
Well, you're keeping well, I'm thinking particularly in terms of when the Ren fans showed up for me, they were very vocal about what they wanted me to
Mm,
do next.
yeah.
And I actually made a video saying, "This is why I haven't done what you've asked
Mhm.
me to do." Because I needed to take a breath and say, "Is this what I wanna create? Is this more?" There are other aspects that I'm interested in, um, and I needed to take that breath. I knew what the YouTube advice was just to jump on it and to do more. And it was
Do
like,
what the
that
audience wants.
feels off, you
It
know?
is. It is off. And this is part of the reason I burnt out a few years ago and had to take a break. Um, because when you allow the algorithm to drive your creations, you basically become a human making AI art, if that makes sense. You know, like
Mm,
you are then just, you know, mid-journey AI. You're producing generative content.
mhm,
And so always holding your own in that sense. What I've really enjoyed is the collaborative discussion about Ren with Nicole. So
mhm,
we're going to continue doing those videos. I've also shared some of my favorite music from my channel with her. We've done a video; she hasn't published it yet. So right now, in terms of Ren, I'm going to keep doing it with Nicole. The next video we're probably going to do is the Money Game trilogy, and that'll be really cool. The but other than that, my content is still going to be focused on some community driven requests. So all of those
yeah,
previous reaction videos that you looked at, the old ones, were done live. I'm still doing my live stream now. I just started doing it again, and I just did one yesterday, and it was all viewer requests, and a lot of the stuff was in line with the kind of content I really like. So I'm going to keep posting those videos and kind of trickling them out over time.
mhm,
I really like Ren is important to me because of the all-encompassing artistic endeavor. And
yeah,
so the other bands I appreciate, there are tons of other artists and bands who I feel the same thing in. And so I'm going to keep digging into that kind of content as well. So we have some more Nightwish videos from their new release coming out. That we actually someone showed me a video that inspired like the creation of Nightwish by their composer, and so we'll have that
mhm,
and some other artists. Actually we watched Chinchilla. the other day on stream,
Okay.
so we'll be doing some videos of hers. And yeah, it's to me, uh, I'll tell you right now, I'm in Sacramento, California right now. I got here a couple days ago. I'm doing a gig here and for the next 2 weeks, and then I go to Texas. And when you saw the Ren video, that was taken in upstate New York. So I'm traveling all around
Yeah.
and creating content while I do
Yeah.
it. So for me, it's a matter of when I have the time to sit down, make the videos, do the live streams,
Okay.
I'm going to engage in that conversation, and it's the conversation with the community that's going to drive the content and what gets published and that kind of thing, and how I engage. So to avoid that burnout, to avoid that bad feeling of like this doesn't feel right, my
Yeah.
through line is the conversation. So as long as
Okay.
if viewers are asking for something that I want to engage in and continue that conversation in that direction, I'll just let that pull me wherever it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's tricky though. I think it's tricky because if I was listening just to what they'd said, nobody has said to me, "Go interview a reactor." Nobody said that, but I was thinking, "Oh, I really want to know. I, I want to talk to them because my history is being so shy and struggling to show those reactions and the fact that you give language so precisely to the different things, I find that really useful. I, I'm geeking out a bit again.
No,
Sorry.
it's so like language to the videos or the dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you give so you experience a feeling and then you put it into
Mhm.
words, and I'm like, "Ah, I had that feeling. I recognized in your face that I had that feeling, but you actually expressed that." So when you said, for example, "Oh, I feel called out about that,"
Mhm.
I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's how I could refer to that feeling."
Yeah. It's you know what it is I mean, you said you watched some of my earlier videos like the BTS, the more popular
Yeah,
older
yeah,
videos, and um I started out doing just what you were describing, just doing the technical analysis, doing the what I
yeah,
thought was the most valuable. But what I realized over time, like hundreds of videos took me to realize what people appreciated was just the honesty. And the
yeah,
education has a place. Like the education has a
yeah,
place to do two things. Both share with the lovers of this artist, a technical explanation for why they feel this way. But
yeah.
at the end of the day, the most accessible thing is the feel this way component of that sentence. And so you
Mhm.
can, if you express the feeling, express the technical reasons for the feeling, and also, just share yourself, that's just adding dimension to that educational component.
Yeah,
If we're talking about art, there's no use of just, I'll say it this way, plenty of people have like art degrees, but there's that whole
yeah,
uh underlying thing of just because you have an art degree doesn't mean you're an artist. At the end of the day, it's the
yeah.
expression and the feeling that your creation gives that leads it to having legs. So
Mhm.
when when I'm listening to something, it's not about how low is the larynx, how clean is the sound,
Yeah.
how is the articulation in in the sound. That can all contribute to the entire thing,
Mhm.
but it's the final result that people wanna engage with, and it's like, "Why is this? Why is this? Why is this?" The question that's always been
Yeah,
happening, "Why is art so special to us when it's seemingly, in a mathematical sense, useless in a way?" But there is something so true about it, and
yeah,
answering that eternal question every time. If there's someone somewhere who loves this artist so much, um, who
yeah,
wants to know more, what do I wanna tell them to bring more meaning to this work, if that makes sense?
yeah, yeah. Now I've got 2 words that I wanted to ask you
Mm.
about. I had the feeling when you used them in the video that's why I was looking down at the
Oh,
piece of
sure, sure,
paper
sure.
earlier, sorry
No
about that.
worries.
I had the feeling that the words meant something more to you than I knew them as. One of the words was goblin.
Mhm.
You used the word goblin a few times, and I was like, "Okay, I know the word goblin, but I think he's talking about something else. I think he's talking about something from a story or an archetype or
Absolutely.
something."
So,
Yeah.
I don't talk about this I'm a huge, like, fantasy nerd, like Dungeons& and Dragons
Okay.
and that kinda thing, and the goblin archetype is the the character who always does the worst thing, the most unpleasant thing. Whether they think it's good or
Okay.
bad, their best intention is evil. Their best intention is going to be, they're like, oh, this is going to be great for you, and it's something that's terrible for you. And then their worst intention is horrid destruction. So when I
Okay.
think of the character of the goblin, I think of like the archetypal enemy, the archetypal.
Okay.
um and here's the thing about it, is goblins in these fantasy worlds are never the strongest character. That's the other thing. They're never, it's not the big baddie, right? it's it's the it's the it's the nothing enemy, the enemy who just wishes the worst. And
Okay.
that's kind of what I
Okay.
meant.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting, a certain vacuous, I don't know, all show kind of thing of
In a way, it's more about like the existence of, and that's, yes. And so I love that you brought this up, because that's like where my head went, because in no way is this evil voice unbeatable. But at face value,
Mhm,
I think vacuous is the best way to put it. At face value, it is nothing you want. At face value, it is
mhm,
nothing that you can have. Like nothing that helps you. It is just negative.
mhm.
But it is something that can be dealt with and can kind of curb you in a positive direction. And um, that was just my like instinctive response in the moment,
Yeah.
because that is
It
what.
was
Yeah, because I was hearing, the negative voice, and then rising up over that negative voice,
yeah,
or at least trying. At that point, I forget where we were in the song, but regardless, it's like this negativity, there's a way to overcome it. This negative voice exists to just to shut down the good, just to have bad intentions. And so
yeah,
I don't want to, in framing it in a verbal way, I don't want to give it power. I don't want to assign
yeah,
it power
yeah,
greater than my own, right?
yeah. It was just so interesting because Nicole said, "Oh, like Gollum in Lord of the
Mm.
Rings," and you went, "Yes, a goblin," and you kept coming
I
back,
know.
"Yes, a
No,
goblin,"
no,
and
no,
I
I
was like,
know.
"Oh, he's got something in his head
Yeah.
that is very
And I and
specific
I
to
I
that
knew what
word."
she was talking about with Gollum, like Gollum and Smeagol,
Yeah,
the dual personalities.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I it it's so cool that you brought this up, because I was thinking about this afterwards as well, and people made some comments about it, and I was like, I don't think it's as like as yin and yang, as black and white, as, at least that's not how I want to think about it.
yeah,
I think the scary voice is only as scary as you give it merit. And it's scary
yeah,
because of the uh what's the right word? It's scary because of the ideas that it brings, the negative ideas. But you're a
mhm,
creative, I'm a creative. If you've worked through that voice, you've conquered that
mhm,
voice before. And so you can understand and
yeah,
rationalize that it's not a scary threat, but it is a malignant threat. It is a
mhm,
negative threat, and you don't want to give it power.
yeah,
So thinking of it as
yeah,
like the most baseline plebeian bad guy
okay.
in a
I
video
I could
game or
see
something
that.
is a little
Yeah,
more, they're taunting. It's taunting, and the
yeah,
taunts are
yeah,
not nothing. But what is the real power? The power is whatever you give it. It's not going to
yeah,
try to throw you into Mount Doom, and while also trying to be your friend on the other hand.
I could s yeah,
It's going to be a taunt. It's going to taunt you and make you feel bad. And if you don't
yeah,
do anything, it's still going to be there. But it's not something that you
yeah,
can't overcome. Yeah.
okay.
That's
Word
the
number
whole, yeah, yeah.
2.
Go ahead.
I'm a bit of a word nerd, can you tell?
It's great.
You said bardcore.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Bard? Now, I know the word bard, but I don't really know the word bard. So, because you were saying storytelling, but music as well. So,
Hmm.
can you tell me
Yeah.
more?
So this comes from, it's let me just make sure I have this right. So French magical bard. So this bardcore is I think a term I heard from Nicole. But the reason it works is in my mind, is there was a group of traveling French musicians around the medieval and Renaissance time, uh, who were did performed madrigals, which were basically like repetitive stories in music. And these would these were revolutionary because they were one of the first secular musical performances ever. Before this, music
Okay.
was assigned only to the church. And this madrigal performance, a lot of it was about romance, lost love, at the time, the most revolutionary personal music you could make. So
Hmm.
bardcore, which was the term Nicole told me, it makes perfect sense when you are evoking a story with your music. Your music is all about storytelling. Your music is about getting to
Hmm.
the core issue uh, through the medium of just a guitar and a person. So these people would play lutes. They would play just like a lute, and they'd go around to taverns, to different courts, and they'd perform their music for
Hmm.
money. And they would only get paid if the story hit the person who was
Okay.
listening. And the hardcore aspect is, the different influences, the different musical influences in that. So it's hardcore and bard. The bard aspect is more of like a historical revelation. People might disagree with me based on their ideas of it because there's a lot of other
Yeah.
context for bard, but I really do like that. You know, earning your bread with the story impact of your music, using the music to tell the story,
Yeah.
and earning your bread that way because it's about the emotional impact, nothing else. And
Yeah.
yeah, the entertainment, I guess, the meaning that can be drawn. I mean, those are one and the same in my opinion. But um, yeah, that's I think what bardcore is about. And I read some comments and apparently bardcore is like the name that the Renegades gave to Ren, for
Oh,
the idea.
okay.
Yeah, um,
Yeah.
for just to define his music, but from what I've seen, there's no real genre definition to his music. But I do agree that like bardcore is a very cool and it's a genre that works for the definition because it doesn't restrict
Yeah.
anything, but it has that hardcore element of like brutal honesty that people really love to hear in things like punk music and metal music, and
Yeah. Yeah.
digging into like the deep sadnesses that bring beauty to our lives. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I saw a few people mention about that. But anyway, the time is zooming on, and I really want to talk about your performance
Oh,
side because
sure.
we haven't. And you say you're traveling around all of America.
Yes. Yeah.
So
So,
exciting.
like I said, like I'm a full time performer. Pretty much, probably like 8 to 10 months out of the year, I'm out of the house
Okay.
performing. And so right now, I'm like I said, in Sacramento, California. And I have my whole, content creation set up here that I pack up into a suitcase and bring wherever, I'm in a little studio apartment that the opera company put me up in. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's my thing. So later today I go off to rehearsal. I have a voice lesson later with my voice teacher. So I'm juggling all of those things, but it keeps things fresh. I feel like I can
Yeah.
sometimes when I'm doing opera, like it's roles I've done before, it's things I've done before, and so when I'm on stage, I'm exploring new dynamics in that. But uh, it can feel a little not stale, but just like I'm doing my job, and I love singing. Like
Yeah.
singing, if there's one thing in my life that I want to just keep doing, it's getting on stage and expressing to people. Like that's the core of who I
Yeah.
am. And in a way, when I sit down in front of the camera and make these videos and do my live streams, that's also what I'm doing. Expressing
Yeah.
and having a conversation and trying to give something to someone that they didn't know they needed, if that makes sense, or
Yeah.
that they didn't know would bring some light to something in their life. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm curious about your voice because you said I think you mentioned in the timeline that you were doing the reaction videos and then you started performing, but had you trained as a
Oh yeah,
performer
yeah. So
before?
before
Yeah.
I
Right.
graduated with my second degree in vocal performance, classical vocal performance, spring 2020. So when the lockdown started,
Great time.
yeah, great timing, right? The lockdown started, there was no I had some, gigs booked right out of school that had to be canceled, and so when the lockdown started, I was just at home. No stages were open,
Okay.
nothing was possible, so, I did have I mean, I had plenty of performance opportunities before that while I was earning my degrees, but I wasn't able to do a full-time career because I was in school, And so when everything shut down, I jumped right into doing this content somehow. I got it was a lot. It was a long journey. You probably had a similar experience during that time of like, what do I do with all my time? What do I create? I want to create. How do I create? And but the lockdown started to end and the jobs became open again, and so I started getting those jobs. And I went down
Okay.
to my first long term contract was in Miami, Florida, with the Florida Grand Opera, where I when I got there, I was still trying to make content. However, that was a really time intensive residency. I was a resident artist there, so every day I was on call to go do whatever performances they needed me to do, and then scheduled things. And so that's when I started slowing down the content. And at that point, I
Yeah.
was like, I just have to choose. Let's just perform for now, and I'll come back to content. YouTube's not going anywhere. Opera, I don't know how long it's going to be around for, so I'm just going to keep trying to do it. And then that worked out, and I got an agent who now books me jobs around the U.S. And I'm actually looking at some stuff in Europe for next season, which will be
Oh,
cool. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know anything about this
Mm.
world at all that you're talking about.
It's
So,
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to um, how you would think of like Hollywood actors, for example. Their agent gets
okay.
them a job, they go off and film on set for a few weeks, a few months, and come back. Opera contracts are usually 2 to 4 weeks long, and you rehearse for 2/3 of the time, and then you perform your performances for the last time because there's a lot of different components that go into it. You have to have the orchestra, you have the other singers, there's a conductor, director. The productions are always different. This is something that people don't really know about
Yeah.
opera. Is every production of every opera is totally unique for the most part. So the time in which the opera is performed, you could be doing it traditionally set in 1750, or you could be doing it set in a club in 1990. Like that. That's part of
Okay.
the Gesamt of opera. That all encompassing idea that you can bring new ideas up by changing the way that the people are dressed, or by changing the way the acting is done, or changing the way
Yeah.
that the story is told in a way, because it's this canvas that's been around for hundreds of years. Let's use some new colors. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was also that your speaking voice is 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 to me so pleasant to listen to. And I was thinking, is this something that has evolved over time in terms of
My speaking
clarity?
voice, the only adjustments I've made for my speaking voice are just to make it a little more healthier, so I could sit and do like 3 hours
Okay.
of live streams
Yeah.
without tiring my voice out, because that was the only difference. Um, but the but it if I listen back, it's pretty much the same thing I've been doing. But that's because I had trained 10 years previously to be a singer, so the voice itself, I do speak pretty low, but the repertoire I sing is very high. I sing tenor repertoire,
Oh,
so
you said
um,
I think you said
this is
tenor.
just
Yeah.
like a more comfortable place to speak in when it comes to like making videos and stuff. And it's interesting that like you mentioned that. I do think that has something to do with like the videos being easy to digest and watch and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I've never thought about it, but I do. That is like
Yeah.
a small perk to being like a singer and making videos is you can.
Yeah, it's just the quality, isn't it? There's something must be that I'm picking up on about the quality
I talk about this in,
of
when listening to singers all the time. It's like the quality of a voice is the emotion and the expression of the person. Uh, there's
Mhm.
the topic I keep coming back to now more and more, because more artists are exploiting this or employing this, is the idea of vocal disability, where a person's story can be told in the quality of their voice. And there have been multiple studies on trauma, where trauma
Mhm.
victims will have vocal issues, some kind of vocal issue that will come across, whether it's like a fry or a raspiness, and it's from emotional trauma that happens. In art, the way that we can contextualize this is when someone uses raspiness or screechiness or something that a traditional
Mhm.
vocalist would be like, that's unhealthy or that's incorrect singing. What
Yeah.
it actually is a strong emotive tool. So in
Yeah.
Jenny and Screech, when Ren is kind of like screaming out or kind of rasping the sound, you hear more pain in that story. Even if the text has nothing
Yeah.
to do with the pain, it adds an extra dimension of it. So because we as humans, we are sympathetic listeners. We are our mirror neurons start to fire not only based on the words that are being said, but based on what we see happening and what we hear in the quality of the voice. So
Mhm.
one of the problems I get in their videos is like, oh, you don't feel anything, because this is someone who's clearly very orally sympathetic, who's hearing me speak in
Mhm.
this like very calm, pretty well balanced way.
Yeah.
That's just how I'm trained to do it. And if I'm talking about something deep and emotional, even if I'm feeling that, if it's not coming out in my voice, they don't believe me. And that's a real
Okay.
thing. And I have total empathy for that, because that's how it operates. Because
Mhm.
I'm trained to speak this way, and if that's the way that this person receives information, then that's a totally valid response for them. But in art in general, that's part of that dynamic of the voice is and reaction videos as a whole, when you're watching them, your mirror neurons are firing. You're watching someone
Yeah.
experience something, and you are feeling that like literally yourself. And so the quality of their voice, the quality of their body language, the things they're doing with their face, with their hands, with whatever, you're going to feel that yourself. So it's really fascinating to me to see the different audience takes on different scenarios based on those factors. That's one of the most wonderful things that I can both I can almost I can see it happening in the videos that I make for me, but then I can also
Mhm.
engage in it as an idea in the art that's happening. Like everything from body
Yeah.
language, everything from like different vocal qualities that are coming through that are being used intentionally or unintentionally is the musical subtext to the song. Um,
Mhm.
we listened to a video yesterday. Oh my gosh, I loved it. Um, it was actually an artist that Ren had recommended on his channel, and
Okay.
he did that similar like mouth trumpet thing that Ren had did in the Tales of Jenny and Screech, and his voice was just filled with so much pain, but the lyrics were so
Mhm.
beautiful that I had to like stop and think about it, being like, okay, why are the lyrics so like beautiful and calm, but I'm still getting so much pain? It's
Yeah.
because of all the vocal tension that's going into it, but it was still
Yeah.
being so like triumphantly sung that you you had this subtext of painfulness to justify everything that was happening. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty and the like the depth of music that you can talk about and engage with and kind of share with people, because if you're listening to something and you don't know why it makes you feel a certain way, you're going to get curious. So there's a tool to kind of understand what's happening there.
Yeah. I'm completely with you. I'm looking at the time.
No
I
worries.
know you're super busy at the moment. I'm so grateful that you've fitted me in. Is there anything that you want to end with?
Uh, this this was really, Joanne, this was really amazing. I'm happy to answer a couple more
I have
questions.
some weird interests, don't
No,
I?
this
Just
is but you know what's crazy is this is the kind of stuff I think about all the time. Like
yeah,
whenever a colleague of mine, a musician, wants like hears that I do YouTube and they're like, I'm really interested. How do I do this? I have these
yeah,
conversations with them. I'm like, this is why this works. This is why this is meaningful. This is why this isn't cheap content. This is a necessary dialogue that we
yeah,
need to be having about art, and to sort of democratize art in a way that takes it away from these like, corporate billboard chart, artists, which is great music. We need that in it, but to really lift up the best artists and the best music and bring awareness to it, and we just need to
yeah,
have these conversations on
yeah,
where we are in the conversation.
yeah. But I think there's so many more reasons to enjoy art rather than, oh, I can dance to this at the disco type of thing. And,
Hmm.
and I've been listening to that kind of music today. I've just been in a bit of a celebratory
Hmm.
mood, and that's all
Yeah.
great. But this is something else. This is, like you say, the story and, wow, that's me, and I can relate to that, and that's my life, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
completely different
yeah.
purpose. Yeah.
It's but the beauty is that it all has a place. There's always,
Yeah,
we as
yeah.
humans, we aren't just our pain and our success. We are, the dancing in the kitchen on a Friday morning kind of,
I've some really cheesy songs that I was
and
dancing to
that's,
too.
I always want to bring whimsy to my content in
Yeah,
some way. There's or just myself to everything I do, because if it's all gravity, seriousness, triumphant, everything, then
Yeah.
you get tired. And when you're tired, none of it, starts to mean anything. It's the whimsy is what keeps you lighthearted and able to just
Yeah.
go through and keeps you in that flow in a way. When
Yeah.
everything can just be a little light. And
Yeah.
yeah, I love the way you put that. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And I think that's perfect. That's the way I'm gonna end. So, I'm gonna hit end for the recording, and then I'll just, um, check in with you just before you say goodbye and rush off,
Sure.
but for everybody else watching, thank you.